Now the second gear synchronizer in this truck is completely worn out, and so it makes it a real son of a bitch to drive. This may have brass synchronizers, I don't know. I've never found a transmission rebuild kit for it. Mainly I want to look at the rebuild kit so I can see what type of synchronizers it uses, not because I actually want to rebuild the transmission, because that would involve taking the transmission out and also clearing off my workshop bench. So regular gear oils contain sulfur as an extreme pressure additive. Now there are two different types of sulfur. I forget the terminology. The regular sulfated gear oils, the sulfur is corrosive to brass and yellow metals. There is a modified type of sulfur which is not corrosive to the yellow metals. However, that also has an issue. The bond between the sulfur and the brass is stronger than the bond between the brass and the brass, so you still end up wiping off microscopic layers of your synchronizers every time you shift. So this, I drained the transmission fluid out of it. It came out nice and clear. It may be the factory transmission fluid for all I know, but obviously it smelled like sulfur, so it is a sulfur-containing gear oil. So I originally tried, I actually had some SAE 90 gear oil laying around that was for a boat, and it contained lead as the extreme pressure additive, a type of lead compound rather than sulfur. So I had maybe half a quart or a quart of that, maybe 3/4 of a quart. I added that, and I topped off the rest with a 15W40 motor oil. Now, of course, a 15W40 and an 80W90 are almost the same viscosity. Gear oils, their viscosity numbers are different than motor oil viscosity numbers. If you compare a 1540 motor oil to an 80W90 gear oil in a common unit like centistokes at 100 degrees Celsius, you'll find that the motor oil is thinner, yes, but it just barely, like almost within the margin of error, not like the numbers would imply. You know, the 80 seems to imply twice the thickness of the 40, which is not correct. For a while, this shifted a little bit better, but not great, not really what I'm looking for. And I think it even, over time, it actually ended up getting worse again. So now I'm wondering what fluid I might try next to kind of band-aid this issue. Now, some people recommend there's a Ford fluid, you know, the XT5Q, whatever. You'd have to look that one up. That's like 25 bucks a quart. Supposedly that makes transmission shift really nice, and it can help with the worn-out synchronizers. And there's also Redline lightweight shockproof. They also make a heavyweight shockproof, but that's probably pushing it. The Redline lightweight shockproof, it has like a oil film shear strength of a 75-140. So again, lightweight in quotation marks because it's relative. It's lightweight compared to their heavyweight. It's not really that light of a weight. It is, 140. And certain BMWs I read can't use that Redline lightweight shockproof oil because the input bearing doesn't get lubricated. The means by which the bearing is lubricated is not conducive to the thicker fluid. That type of issue doesn't necessarily affect other transmissions. I digress. Now, the shockproof oils contain additives that are supposed to disperse the load such that the gears really never touch. The microscopic particles in the oil kind of, almost like a dry lubricant. You imagine, like the graphite you spray in a door lock, for the key. Those particles, not like a zinc, where the ZDDP actually bonds to the metal, and then you kind of wear the zinc away and replace it rather than wearing the metal. Not quite like that. I don't believe the particles in the shockproof oils actually bond to the surface. They're just in suspension, almost like little roller bearings, you imagine. Now, supposedly the shockproof oils can help improve shifting, with worn-out synchronizers, probably partially because of the thick viscosity, also partially because of the particles, which would, one would imagine, kind of take up some of the space between the synchronizer and the cone it's meant to grab. Especially if the synchronizer is worn and it's farther away, those particles will take up space. Of course, the shockproof oils cost like I don't know, 25 bucks a quart or something, maybe more than that. Yeah, 92, maybe it was 92 bucks per gallon. And the other problem is those are, I believe, a calcium compound that's in suspension. Now, we don't necessarily want to wear out these synchronizers anymore. So originally, you know, in the early 2000s, supposedly Redline did not recommend their shockproof oils for use in synchronized manual transmissions. And then supposedly they updated that, so in recent years they maybe do recommend their shockproof for synchronized transmissions. So why they updated it, I don't know. Maybe they discovered, you know, it doesn't wear out the synchronizers and it's fine, or maybe they decided it wears the synchronizer so slowly it does not matter. Who knows? So that would be something interesting to try. But Mom says we have Redline lightweight shockproof at home. So this here is Arco Graphite. Similar premise, you know, the graphite microscopic particles will take up space. The other thing is I think the graphite is less likely to wear the synchronizers, especially if they're brass. The brass synchronizers are going to be soft. The graphite is probably less likely to wear the synchronizers compared to the calcium compound. I'm making this up, and hopefully, you know, we'll get the same effect as the shockproof oil with those particles in suspension. And this doesn't come out of nowhere. There was a forum user I had read somewhere along the way. He actually had a Mazda that, you know, the synchronizers were worn out, probably especially in second gear. And many years ago, he had a friend that told him to add graphite to his transmission. So he did it. He had a bunch of graphite. And supposedly he drove the transmission for years and it shifted much better, and it always shifted much better. The other thing is, obviously, that's a 1040. So that won't exactly have the viscosity of the kind of 75 140 that the Redline shockproof touts, but we can always increase the viscosity to taste with some Lucas engine oil stabilizer. So of course, is this going to be as good as Redline lightweight shockproof? Yes, it is. Alright, so it's been a while since that last clip. Don't ask me how long, you're not allowed to ask questions. When I drained the fluid out of the transmission, I found there was a little bit of discoloration, and it kind of looked like brass to me. So that would make sense why the transmission felt like it was getting worse. If I was to... Also, I did notice it had a bit of a sulfur smell, which is odd. You know, I drained all the sulfated gear oil. Probably there was just enough residue in between all the moving parts. I would guess the discoloration is probably because the leaded gear oil has the same problem as the kind of, you know, non-activated sulfur. Again, there's two different kinds of sulfur, I forget, where the bond between the leaded compound and the brass is stronger than the bond between the brass and the brass. So every time you shift it, it probably wipes it off. Again, there's no literature on that. The leaded gear oil, I think, is obsolete and uncommon, so how am I supposed to look up whether or not that works? Well, I think we've discovered our answer, so note to self, I'm not going to try that again. I think I went with about half a quart of Lucas Oil Stabilizer, maybe a tiny bit more. Pretty close to half a quart. And then the remaining quart, was Arco Graphite 1040. The 1040 felt a little bit on the thin side. Anyway, so I've been driving that truck now for a couple months or something. I have no idea. Passage of time is inconceivable to me. And there was maybe one time a gear bonked. I was rolling fairly slowly, but I was still rolling, and I put it into first, and I got a slight bonk out of it. Other than that, it always synchronizes when I drive it. I do find that, you know, I haven't tried it necessarily with the, or actually no, I have tried it with the new transmission fill, and I don't think anybody else has ground a gear either. I did find that when the transmission wasn't synchronizing correctly, if I let other people drive the truck, they tended to, you know, kind of crunch the gear teeth a little bit more often than I did. I tend to be a little bit better at, maybe I'm in practice or I don't know, but I tend to be a little bit better at matching it, so I'm not as hard on the synchronizers at bringing that clutch plate to speed. But no, I did have at least one person drive it since changing the fluid with the Arco Graphite and the half-quarter Lucas. Yeah, I don't think they ever ground the teeth in the transmission. So basically, as far as we're concerned, and especially when I drive it, it synchronizes. It works. Now, you might say, well, what the fuck with the Arco Graphite? Why don't I just go buy some Lucas and dump it in my transmission? Well, you could do that, and the Lucas would probably make your transmission synchronize correctly. The problem is, because the Lucas is so thick, the more you add, you're really going to ding your gas mileage. Like, you know, depending on how much Lucas you add, I would expect you would be reducing your gas mileage by several points, like, you know, from, say, 22 to 20 or something like that. So that basically my goal, you know, the Lucas may protect the gears very well, but it's not worth the price that you pay in extra fuel costs. So in my case, I wanted to use as little of the Lucas as possible, and I wanted to rely as much on the graphite as possible. Then, of course, the other thing you could do is, instead of the Arco Graphite, you could ostensibly just get a powdered graphite and dump it in the transmission. That would probably also work. Well, the moral of the story is a proper scientific test with just 1540 and Lucas versus the 1540 graphite and Lucas, you know, the comparison to see if the graphite actually helped. That would be, you know, what would be necessary. In my case, I don't have unlimited time and money. I just... So here's a data point for you, and if you happen to collect any other data points, feel free to compare it against my data point, and you can draw your own conclusions, but those are my results with Arco Graphite.
Yeah, man! There it is! So this is Super Crazy Dangerous. That right there is Balin Mania, and we are going to do something really stupid today. It was a terrible idea. Balin might die. It was making me uncomfortable. Go, Balin!
You riding this?
What the fuck is happening?
Balin said not to talk crap about this camera. It's a piece of shit.
This is so unbelievably sketchy. Why would you put me through this, you jerk?
That's the power of really old engineering.
It'd be nice if it didn't kill me. It's not required.
I felt it fucking pop.
Make a wish, everyone. Make a wish. Not okay. You went too far. This guy, man. This guy.